In America, approximately 3 women are killed by a spouse, lover, or partner every day. In recent years, 53% of these women are black. In fact, black women are 4 times more likely than their white peers to be murdered by a lover and 7 times more likely to be killed when pregnant than white women. To make matters worse, 9 out of 10 murdered black women were killed by a man they knew. This problem is multi-layered, and anyone ignoring these layers will hinder the fight to end domestic violence more than help it. Anyone claiming it's purely a leftover of slavery is as lost as anyone claiming that black men are simply more violent than white men. The first layer is structural. Black people have been exposed to racial and gender oppression on an intergenerational level, and as mentioned before, these are things that have existed before violent hip-hoppers and modern black people. On the racial front, there have been educational, employment, and economic inequalities at a systemic level that also taints everything, like having enough money to leave an abuser, having access to quality homeless shelters and jobs, to brazen corruption in law enforcement. Speaking of law enforcement, from a historical perspective, most black women have been reluctant to call the police on abusers, as police are corrupt, violent, and often ineffective in deterring intimate partner violence, with many being abusers in their own families as well. Data suggests that cops commit acts of domestic violence against spouses and children at up to 15 times that of the general population. The criminal justice system, tainted by racism and misogyny, makes speaking up against an abuser a dangerous gamble. Sometimes black women don't even have to actually kill their partners to be jailed, like in the case of Marissa Alexander. In 2010, just 9 days after giving birth, her abusive husband attacked her. She fired a warning shot with a gun she was registered to own and ended up being found guilty of aggravated assault with a deadly weapon in Florida, a state known for its notorious stand your ground self-defense law. Her husband even testified in court that he had been abusive towards her and most of the women in his life to no avail. And what about violence, a structural issue throughout humanity's existence? From public beatings of enslaved people at the whipping post to church-sanctioned child beatings, the structural violence of those who are molded to be subservient has been a recurring theme in our community. Black boys and girls often face unfathomable levels of physical and sexual violence, and often don't have anyone to turn to for healing. For boys, the inequalities and violence converge with expectations of manhood in a patriarchal society, another structural issue. To often make men with a lack of resources and a lack of success in a white man's world more susceptible to the generic stereotypes black men are socialized to embrace. And this is where we enter the cultural layer. Numerous scholars have discussed the commonality of poor, neglected, and/or dehumanized black boys falling into a certain persona for self-esteem and protection. This persona involves toughness, not showing emotions, wielding an exploitative attitude towards women, and/or resorting to violence to settle disputes. I can already hear the fingers going at the keyboards right now, but none of the things I've mentioned are a call to coddle abusive black men or demonize the good ones. Can we rewind that and say it again? None of the things I've mentioned are a call to coddle abusive black men or demonize the good ones. Let's not play coy here. Structural issues like patriarchy, poverty, and racism exacerbate the gangster and pimp personas, but these personas are also baked into black culture at this point. From blues lyrics to modern hip-hop, domestic violence has been satirized, downplayed, joked about, or ignored. The dehumanization of black men in media as violent creatures incapable of reason, thought, or self-control with insatiable sexual lust has endured since slavery. The dehumanization of black women in media as creatures who are either good, obedient mommy figures or whores undeserving of respect has been recurring from the days of Jim Crow to modern piss-poor observations made by everyone from rappers to teenage TikTokers to struggling podcasters looking for a viral moment.
Today the question is, which do y'all prefer, black or white females?
Oh, bro. I gotta rock with them Caucasians. I'm not gonna lie. They get it done for me.
For sure.
Both y'all?
Yeah.
In and outside of the black community, black women are stereotyped as angry and/or lascivious, making them less credible victims in the eyes of law enforcement and others. The structural stigma against single unmarried women and the cultural stigma against hoes, body counts, and soul ties can make the thought of being alone especially troubling for black women raised to measure their value by their relationship to men. Have you been picked? Do you have a man?
Can I go about getting his attention without seeming crazy and desperate?
You have plans with your boyfriend?
I have a boyfriend.
Okay, so when you get one, no, but when you get one.
So with dating as hard as it is out here, dealing with unsavory behavior for relationship status or marital security is a tale as old as time. Additionally, there's a cultural expectation for black women to stand 10 toes down for her community and not send another black man to jail. A black woman who decides enough can run the risk of being accused of betraying her partner and her race. The structural issue of mass incarceration therefore makes the issue of race loyalty culturally relevant. These factors lead to a lack of income and opportunities that makes it harder for black women to escape abusive situations, especially when they are poor or have kids. Speaking of kids, reproductive coercion is a major concern for abused women of all races. This is when a partner manipulates the relationship by pressuring pregnancy or sabotaging birth control. All of this leads to women being more dependent on fathers and informal faith-based support. Speaking of faith-based support, yet another cultural component is the black church, which has directly and indirectly sanctioned the subservience of black women in multiple ways, meaning women's issues and concerns were often deprioritized. That's tragic because black women are the most religious group in the country, and years of internalized sermons and advice that a good woman uplifts her man, the one bestowed upon her by God, and sticks by him is all too common. Out of all abused women, black women are the most likely to turn to their faith, religion, and faith community for support. These structural, cultural, and situational layers often go ignored or pushed to the wayside in divisive arguments that ultimately help nobody. It's part of the reason why black women committed to divesting think violence against black women would disappear if they simply date white men. I don't need to list out the number of white terrorists, serial killers, and family annihilators to make my point that divester women have been structurally indoctrinated into believing white men are superior to and less violent than black men, because it should be obvious. But that's not my only complaint. I've got smoke for everyone. Pro-black men invested in positive representations of the black community would rather sweep the brutal treatment of black women under the rug. Take prison abolitionists who don't believe in incarcerating or executing abusers and murderers of women. They acknowledge the changes that need to happen to make the system more equitable and intimate partner violence obsolete. But sometimes their casual write-offs as women who challenge abolitionist ideology as carceral feminists who simply don't understand or who are committed to harm rather than being committed to their own fucking survival is tone deaf. Amid the rise of black women and children caught in gun crossfire, like in places like Philadelphia, at what point do we question violence of all kinds? When DaBaby brought out Tory Lanez, the man who shot Meg Thee Stallion at Rolling Loud, the same festival that allowed alleged abuser Lil Uzi Vert, alleged sex trafficker Blueface, and convicted rapist and woman beater Kodak Black to perform, I'm sure he never thought in a million years that he would be canceled and kicked off the roster of several festivals. Not because he brought out the man who shot his estranged collaborator moments after she performed, throwing a restraining order into possible violation and serving as a metaphorical slap in the face, but instead because he made homophobic remarks and doubled down on them. While I'm glad that DaBaby is facing consequences for his maliciousness, the incident showed that violence against women, particularly black ones, is not enough to render a celebrity undesirable. In the mainstream, black celebrities are canceled sooner for anti-Semitism and homophobia or transphobia against white people than for violence against women. In the culture, black celebrities are canceled sooner for snitching or allegedly showing feet in racial chat rooms than for cold-blooded murder or violence against women. Clearly, this is as much an American problem as it is a black community problem. In recent years, intimate partner violence has become more taboo, but we still have a long way to go.